Hey, what's up, everybody? Good evening. Happy Friday to you. Welcome to another episode of Shape the Podcast. You know me. My name's Kyle Waller. I'm your host. Uh, man. So before we get into our guest tonight, who happens to be a young man by the name of Laverne Friesen, it's been a week. All right. Those of you who are friends of me on Facebook, those of you who are friends of my wife on Facebook, uh, know that she had surgery on her shoulder. All right. She went in Monday morning. They were only gonna fix like two places. They ended up fixing five. Um, so she's been home all week dealing with that. I was home Monday and Tuesday and Wednesday, um, helping her get acclimated, and then I went back to work yesterday um, and today. But yeah, it's been a week. She's trying to be self sufficient, do things on her own, which is great. Um, but it's also been very taxing on her body. Um, also, it's been a pretty emotional week for my family because over the weekend we did lose a member of our family to cancer. Uh, condolences to my sister Stacy and her daughters because they lost their father and husband. My brother-in-law passed. Um, his funeral was Tuesday, but because of everything going on here at home with my wife, I was unable to attend, but we did watch it via live on the internet. So, we were there in spirit. But other than that, I hope you've all had a great week. Um, man, June is almost done. July's around the corner. 4th of July is next week. So, happy 4th of July from us here at Shape the Podcast. Um, I hope whatever you do, I hope it's safe. All right, and remember those lives who were lost, or those who are serving, because we have that freedom here in the states to celebrate Independence Day. All right. Well, without any further ado, without any ramblings, because I could do that all night long. Um, let's bring on my guest, Laverne Friesen. A little bit about Laverne before I bring him on. Um, he's a former law enforcement officer. Um, he's a survivor of child abuse. He's had some mental health crises in the past, but what he's done with that is turned that around to help those who are past and present law enforcement or anybody in that particular agency and even military. But he's going to come on tonight and he's going to talk about his story and talk about how he got all into that. So, without any further ado, the man of the evening, the grand poobah of the night, Mr. Laverne Friesen. How's it going, sir?
I'm good. I don't think I've ever been called a grand poobah before.
Well, I had to talk it up a little bit, to make you like yes. So, man, well, welcome to the podcast. I'm totally glad that you took the time to do this. I know that our time differences are a little weird. Like I don't know. Are you like an hour behind us?
2 hours.
2 hours. All right.
Yeah.
So and where are you at exactly
I'm
for the
in
viewers?
I'm in northern Alberta, Canada.
All right.
So about a 4 hours drive north of the Alberta capital of Edmonton, Alberta.
Wow. And so I'm guessing because I did look up on your Facebook profile, you're an Edmonton Oilers fan.
Yes.
All right.
Yeah.
Congratulations to that. All that hockey stuff up there. You know
Yeah.
that's where true hockey is. It's in Canada. The Americans do not know how to play hockey. Okay, you want real hockey, you go up to Canada.
Well,
You want.
you guys have some pretty good hockey players, though.
We do, yes. I'm a Nashville Predators fan. I'm from Tennessee originally, so you know We do have some pretty good ones. We're just missing one thing. We're missing a cup.
Yeah,
But
we can close.
but enough about that, man. Introduce yourself to my viewers. Like right now, I don't have anybody viewing, but that's the way it is in this show business. I get a lot of people watching afterwards. So those who are viewing now and those who are going to view afterwards, introduce yourself to everybody.
For sure, I'm Laverne Friesen. I currently work in peer support for, like you mentioned, first responders, frontline workers, and veterans. And I'm also a life coach. I help people kind of overcome their pasts and live lives that they always dreamed about. I was in law enforcement for 15 years. I was a volunteer firefighter for 4 years, or just 4.5 years before that, or actually during that time. I was double dipping for a while. And yeah, I spent most of my life, my adult life, in some kind of public safety role.
All right.
And in 2017, that all kind of started crashing for me.
So what got you into the whole, like, like growing up, like were you always like, hey, I'm gonna be in the public safety focus, I'm going to do this, like what made you say, hey, I want to be, I'm gonna go in the military, or I want to work in some type of law enforcement.
So that's a really interesting story. So
All right.
I grew up in what some people describe as a cult,
Okay.
but regardless, it's a very closed society with very strict rules.
All right.
No TV, no radio. The men all have to have beards, which it's kind of like the Amish in a way, but they're more modern, right? So, anyway, very, very strict rules. And when I grew up very rural. We were about an hour from the nearest town, and I grew up on a farm. And when I was about 5 or 6 years old, a police car went down our back gravel road there in front of our farm with its lights and sirens on. And I was young enough that I got scared. And so I ran in the house and I was scared. And my mom told me that the police officer was going to help somebody. So I thought that was really cool. But the religious organization that my parents belong to, they don't believe in, they were the conscientious objectors in wartime. They don't believe in, carrying weapons or anything like that. So I was told I couldn't be a police officer.
Yeah.
So then I just said, well, maybe I'll be a paramedic. And so when I was 19 years old, I started working hospital security at a large hospital in a big city, because I wanted to decide if I wanted to try to figure out if I wanted to go into law enforcement or paramedicine. And I eventually decided on law enforcement, but I always wanted to help people ever since I was a little kid.
Nice.
Yeah.
So how was, like, growing up in a cult? Man,
well,
I mean, that had to be pretty difficult. I'm guessing,
Yeah, yes and no, because I didn't know any different, right?
Yeah.
So it was normal. I developed anxiety because at a very early, and I never knew I had anxiety until I was 38 years old, 39 actually. But
it's amazing how that happens, right?
Yeah. What?
It's
Yeah,
crazy.
and it wasn't until after my mental health crash, and then I got help, and then I realized, I'm like, wait a minute, I don't worry all the time anymore.
Yeah.
So anyway, so what they do, they're very strict. They're very hellfire and brimstone type preaching.
Mm-hmm.
And so even as a little kid, I was always worried that, if something happened, I would go to hell or something like that.
Yeah.
And that, children shouldn't be worrying about that stuff.
No,
But,
no, never.
Right. And
yeah, you should be a kid. Yeah. You shouldn't have to worry about, oh, if I do this, I'm going to go to hell, or whatever. Like, no kids should have to worry about that, Be a kid.
Right. And the funny thing is, I got to share a funny story about that, because I was 40 years old when I went through my divorce, and I was trying to dig up some childhood stuff because I wanted to just keep healing. And I was talking to the psychologist about my childhood and stuff like that, and she said,
Hmm.
she's like, that's religious trauma. Like as a child, you should not be worrying about that stuff.
Yeah, yeah,
And that's when it kind of clicked for me, and I'm like, whoa. And I started laughing actually. And she was wondered why I was laughing. I said, listen, my 5-year-old boy, his biggest concern is sometimes he sees me snacking on the couch and he's not allowed to eat on the couch.
yeah,
Right? Like that's a appropriate 5-year-old level
yeah.
concern, right? Not to worry about health. But so anyway, I developed anxiety when I was really young. And then what they do is when they're about 12 years old, they pressure you to join that church.
Hmm.
And so then what happens if you don't join the church? The preachers, so the deacons, and then just some of the more, I guess, self-righteous members of the church will always come up to you and always be asking you, like, are you gonna, when are you gonna serve the Lord? When are you gonna join the church?
Yeah.
And if you said like, and there's
I'm not.
like, yeah, well, you couldn't say that, but if you did say that, they would be
Like,
like, well,
shun you. Yeah.
what if you die tonight in your sleep? And so the whole, like, they're saying that to kids, and they said that to me when I was a kid,
Yeah.
and
That's a
that's
scary
just
thing.
this creating fear.
Yeah,
Like,
it's a very scary thing. Yeah.
my biggest fear as a kid was dying in my sleep,
Yeah.
and that's like, that's not very common. You shouldn't
Yeah.
be, but as a
And you
child,
should
you should be.
you shouldn't have to scare somebody to make them believe what you want them to believe in. You know.
Yeah,
So I totally get that, and
yeah,
that had to be, of course, very traumatic to deal with. You know.
yeah, and it was, but I didn't realize that it was traumatic, right? Because that was just the way things were. One of the other things, though, is that in those closed societies, sexual abuse is rampant,
Mm.
and then so this particular organization believes that they're the one true church. They're the only people going to heaven.
All right.
And so when they have that image that they're the perfect church, they will never call the police because they can't have outsiders come in and investigate sexual abuse cases because that would make them look bad.
Mm.
And right. And so sexual abuse was covered up. I was personally sexual abused. And even after I disclosed that to other people, I was abused again.
Yeah, because
And
they thought they probably thought you were lying too. You know, just
yeah,
just
yeah,
because of the religious organization. Oh, no, no,
yeah,
no. We don't make those mistakes, and we don't do that here. No.
yeah, yeah. And actually, I'm going to fast forward to
Yeah.
6 months ago. Um, my dad he did his best with what he had, but he
Mhm.
hadn't been given a lot of tools.
Yeah.
But he's done a lot of work over the last few years, and I had kind of gone no contact with my family for a long time. But about 6 months ago, I wrote him a letter, and then I read it to him, and I just explained to him how horrible my childhood had been, how much trauma I experienced, and stuff like that. But I told him I was coming from a place of love and forgiveness. And when I finished reading that letter to him, he thanked me for writing it, and he said it's all true. And
Mm.
then he hugged me, but then he admitted to me that he wished he had believed me when I had told him that I had been sexually assaulted.
Oh
And
man.
and he had carried that guilt for so long, and he was too scared to say anything. But when I was able to approach him and open up from and explain, talk to him, he was able to like heal that part of him, knowing that I didn't hate him. And I did have a lot of anger and rage for him in my younger years.
Yeah.
But you know, um, and it just goes to show when you heal the people around you as well. You help them heal too, right?
Yeah, because the people, like you said, and also the people see you healing, and they're like, all right, like something's going on here,
Yeah, yeah,
and like, man, but that had to be for you. That had to be hard. That had to be difficult. Um,
yeah,
to to hear somebody who brought you up in that type of atmosphere. For them to, as a grown adult, as an older man, and now you're an older man, for them to say, "Hey, I'm sorry. I should have believed you from the get go." You know,
yeah,
but that also had to break down some walls. I mean, yeah,
yeah,
it sucks. It sucks building relationships or trying to rebuild relationships when you're older because
yeah.
life is so short. I mean, we're not guaranteed much time, so
No,
you want to build those relationships. It's hard to, what I'm saying.
yeah.
It's very hard to do that. So that
It is.
that was eye
I
opening, very eye opening.
yeah.
I'm sure.
It was interesting. But it's it you know it's a testament to the work he's done as well on himself, because I know other guys that have written letters to their parents and talked to them, right? And
Yeah,
then their parents just never talked to them again, right? And so it brought my dad and I closer, and you know we had a good relationship when I was 5, 6, 7 years old.
yeah,
But then trauma started happening, and trauma, that's what it does. It drives you apart a bit, right?
yeah, yeah,
And um, and so we're kind of back to the relationship we should have always had
yeah,
if there hadn't been that trauma. But I see he's had lots of trauma himself, and
yeah,
I had a lot of trauma, right? So
yeah. That's man. I tell you that's it's amazing that it happened. You know,
yeah,
because it's never too late for anybody to go to somebody they love and tell them, hey, all this stuff happened and you didn't do anything about it. You know,
yeah,
but because I've healed from the inside and because I'm the person I am today, I forgive you for you know for that.
yeah,
I forgive you for those transgressions. And I forgive you for what you've not only been through, but what I went through because of you. So,
yeah.
man, that's amazing that you did that. Number one. So let's go past that. So, at what age? When did you start your career in the law enforcement agency? Like, and
So
then,
yeah,
and then we'll talk about where you are today.
for sure. So I worked hospital security for almost 5 years, or no, over 5 years, and then I went and I wanted to kind of explore the world a bit, so
Hmm.
I um, I went and worked on a custom combining crew. We went down all the way to Texas, and then worked our way all the way back up north into Canada. I worked on in the oil and gas industry on a drilling rig for a year and a half, and then I got onto a provincial agency here in Alberta, which is the Sheriff Highway Patrol. It would be similar to the state troopers, state highway patrol down there.
Hmm.
So I was on highway patrol. I was posted to a small town, and I immediately joined the fire department because I didn't realize that I was chasing validation by helping people,
Mm.
but I'm also, I like adrenaline rushes, so I like excitement,
Yeah.
right? So it was kind of perfect for me, but I didn't realize I was burning my candle at both ends. After I had been there for several years, I met my now ex-wife, um, and I was posted to a small town, or a smaller town, and it was really hard to get a transfer. And they so basically Alberta, once you get past the capital of Edmonton, it gets pretty rural. It gets
Yeah.
pretty small, and it goes way up north, and you get a little more isolated. And so I was trying to get a transfer, and they were offering me transfers to smaller towns further away, like
Mm.
further north. right?
You're like,
And
no, I don't want to go further north.
yeah, yeah, by that time I'd already done 7 years in the north. And so my an old acquaintance that I had worked with, he phoned me up one day and he said, I have this opportunity. You can go become a contractor in the oil and gas industry, or oil and gas field, and you can make a lot of money, and you fly in and fly out. So I told him I'd do that right on the phone. I was kind of burnt out, right?
Yeah.
And he's like, well, don't you have to think about it? And I'm like,
You're like,
no,
nope.
I'm done, right?
Yeah.
So I did that for a year and a half, or sorry, 2.5 years. And we moved back to the big city, and I was flying up north, and I was going further north than I already had. I was in northern British Columbia. It'd be a couple 100 miles up the Alaska Highway, or the you guys call it, the Americans call it the Alcan Highway, I think.
Yeah.
And the highway to Alaska, whatever
Yeah.
you want to call it, right?
The highway
So
to Alaska.
yeah, so it was pretty north. And but during those 2.5 years, I got married, and then we had a daughter who
Right.
was daddy's girl, and she still is. And so that made it a lot harder for me to go away. And as a
Yeah.
contractor, I was supposed to work 2 weeks on, 2 weeks off, but I'm a contractor, and if they ask me to stay
You're
in
gonna stay.
longer, I'm
Yeah.
going to stay longer, because
Yeah.
I need the money, or I need the job, right? I need to keep them happy.
Yep.
So then we got pregnant the second time with our son, and so I promised my ex-wife that I would be home before he was born. And so I got a position near where I was born, in the city closest to where I was born, here in northern Alberta, which funnily or ironically enough is further north than the place I was trying to get a transfer out of originally. But it's a city, right? There's about 70,000 people here, so it's better. So I got back into law enforcement. I got a job with the municipality here. Our son was born. I thought I was living my dream. I was married. We'd bought a new house in a nice neighborhood, and I had a little family. I was in the best shape of my life, and I thought I was living my dream. And then in March actually St. Patrick's Day of 2017, I was involved in a traffic stop with probably the most irrational individual that I've ever dealt with in my life.
Mm.
And to make matters worse, he posted a picture of me on the social media, and he filled the comments with veiled threats towards me.
Mm.
But the worst part about it was I'd seen his driver's license, and I knew where he lived, and he lived around the corner from me.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And so that kind of sent me into a bit of a spiral. A week later, I saw him again, and I was working. I was on duty in uniform and in my patrol vehicle, and I saw him, and I had a bit of an anxiety attack.
Mm-hmm.
And he never saw me, but I saw him, and I got that physiological reaction.
Yeah.
But just like I had always done, I always let time just kind of take care of everything.
Yeah.
And probably about a month later, I was put in a position where I was having the most fun that I'd ever had in my career. And then within 3 weeks, I think it was about 3 weeks, my management team pulled me from that and assigned me to a project. And it was a project that I didn't think I was capable of doing. I was kind of worried about it, but they added extra stress by telling me that I was the only person that in the department that could do it.
Mm.
So I put a lot of pressure on myself.
Yeah.
And then, so that's kind of going into the summer months, and I was having a hard time with it. There was a lot of stress, and every time I was on shift and trying to look for advice or help, the management team seemed to be on vacation for the summer. And so what I didn't realize was my old childhood abandonment wound was starting to come through.
Yeah. Because it seemed like nobody cared.
Yeah, it seemed like I was being abandoned, right? I felt abandoned. And all I noticed was increased irritability. And then
Mhm.
I would start getting angry a lot. And so of course my family's noticing it, but at work I'm kind of masking everything. And but it got to the point where I would go into a rage, um, if something, like perceived indiscretions from work. I would go into a rage, and my ex-wife would talk me off the ledge, and so she convinced me to go on a stress leave in November. And so I took 3 weeks off. Well, she didn't convince me to go on the stress leave. She convinced me to go see a counselor.
Mm.
And so but the stigma of mental health was so strong that I didn't even want to go see a counselor. And but I walked into the counselor's office, and within 15 minutes she's like, you have to get away from work for a while. So I took a stress leave for 3 weeks. And the only reason I took 3 weeks is cuz I didn't know how the process had worked. Nobody ever talked about it because nobody talked about mental health.
Mhm.
And my doctor, he said, "Well, how much time do you want?" And I'm like, "I don't know. Like, how much
Yeah.
time does it take?" Right? Like, I had no idea.
Yeah.
And so he's like, "Well, I need a date." And so I had a course in 3 weeks that I was scheduled to go on. So I said, "Oh, I'll come back then." And while I was on my leave, I didn't notice anything change. Like, I still didn't want to go back to work. I still didn't do anything. So then I came back to work, and one of the first things I did was yell at one of my supervisors, and I got accused of insubordination, which in itself should have been a huge red flag for
Yeah.
everybody, right? Um, so I went back to work, and I just tried to make things work. Just kind of coasted along. Nothing got worse. Nothing got better, really. And then um, my shift supervisor left, and so the management team told me that we're not going to hire another supervisor or promote another supervisor, but you're the de facto leader on your team, on your shift. And so of course now I'm just eating all this extra responsibility and putting this
Yeah.
pressure on myself.
But you're not getting
And
paid for it.
oh yeah, yeah, exactly, right.
Yeah.
Um, so for so in Alberta here, the law enforcement agencies, they follow what's called the Selective Traffic Enforcement Program. And in the month of February, it's distracted driving, so cell
Mhm.
phones, stuff like that. So, especially during my time on highway patrol, I had seen the effects of distracted driving, and so I wanted to kind of do an initiative on my shift and get as many, stop as many distracted drivers as we could. So for the month of February, it's February, we in all our spare time, we just spent as much time as we could enforcing the distracted driving law. And about halfway through the month, I noticed that something felt off. I felt off. I couldn't describe it, but it seemed like everybody I dealt with was just abrasive.
Mm.
And so I just started trying. My focus was just to make it to the end of the month. That's all I wanted to do. I just get out of the month. And when March 1st came, I had nothing left. There was nothing in my gas tank. I was apathetic. All I started doing was drinking coffee and driving around all day. I didn't do anything, and that's a red flag. Nobody picked up on that. But eventually, it got to the point where I couldn't sleep, and so of course, when you can't sleep, you're ruminating. Um, you can't sleep. Your mind's not getting its rest. It's not recovering. So it just got worse and worse and worse. I felt like my world started closing in around me,
Mm.
and eventually I became suicidal. And so I would lay in bed at night just thinking about how horrible my life had become, and then I would start planning out my own demise.
Yeah.
But at that time, um, our daughter was 3, and she was sleeping in her own room. But every night she would wake up, and she would come to my bed, and she would cuddle in beside me. And then when I would feel her beside me, and I would listen to her breathing, and I would know that I had to try to fight on, but I didn't know how.
Yeah.
And so I was desperate for help, but I was also too scared to speak up because I was terrified of how I would be perceived, especially in that macho culture. Like I thought I would be seen as weak and broken, and so I was terrified to say anything. And
That's
but
that's the stigma part
yeah,
of men's mental health right there. You know.
yep, yep, 100%. And I had worked with a guy in my career who was involved in peer support, and he had always told me and everybody else, he said, if you're ever struggling, if you ever need help, I'll always be there for you. Just reach out anytime. And the closest I came was starting to text a message at 3 a.m. And then I deleted it because I was too scared of how I'd be perceived. And I realized years later that the reason I didn't do it was because I didn't know with 100% certainty that he was a safe person.
Mm.
Because, and that's why I tell my story, because I'd never heard his story. He just said he'd been through some stuff.
Yeah.
Right. But so that's why I tell my story so graphically, because I want people to know that I understand it. So I didn't text him, but there was one at that point. There was one person in my life that I thought I could probably trust that would probably help me and get me some help. And I went to that person and I told them, or I tried to tell them how bad it was, and the message didn't get through. So I blamed myself. I'm like, man, it's that shame and guilt or shame where you just think you're broken. So I just assumed that I had misspoke somehow.
Yeah. Why do you
And
think? Like, why do you think the message didn't get through?
um,
Now, looking back on it, you know.
they were dealing with their own stuff,
Right.
emotional inavailability, right?
Got it.
So I blamed myself, but I was so desperate that I went back to that person a couple days later and I told them, and I made it to, in my mind, it was crystal clear what I was trying to portray. And they looked me in the eye and they said, I know. And then they walked out of the room.
Yeah.
So there was no availability. They had no availability to take on anything, whatever that reason might be.
Mm.
So I was kind of rock bottom there. I had no, I wanted to end my life,
Yeah.
or I wanted the pain to end,
Yeah.
but I didn't know how, or I didn't know how to get out, but I was desperate to stay alive because I wanted to stay alive for my kids.
Yeah.
Right. And so it was a really hard spot. I went on a instructor course actually. Somehow during all of this, my department had decided that I would make a good instructor, even though like I was having outbursts in the office. You know, all I was doing was drinking coffee, driving around. But I think, well, one of my friends was in tight with management and he wanted me to have the course, so that might have helped. But so I got sent to Colorado for a week to learn to do the law enforcement bicycle patrol instructor course.
Uh,
And so we got to ride mountain bikes around the foothills of Colorado. And I should have been having the time of my life. It was a very fun course. But
yeah.
halfway through the course, I started dreading coming back to work.
Because you knew what you had to go back to.
Yeah, and I still wasn't sleeping. If I the nights before work, I couldn't get any sleep. But I ran into a firefighter I knew. We had never worked together. The extent of our relationship was having coffee occasionally, but we chatted for about 2 hours, and I don't think he knew I was struggling, and I most definitely didn't tell him I was, but that conversation gave me a spark for life, and I kind of got hope again. And so a few months after that, I was able to um, a municipality that the county that surrounds the city I worked in, they started hiring, and I was able to get hired on there. And I still feel like I faked them, because I thought they would never hire me because I was going through my stuff. But
Mm-hmm.
I think it also shows to a point that you can be very high functioning while you're suffering pretty bad, right? So I thought everything would get better. I started the new position for a new municipality, but I was under less stress, but I felt something was still off.
Mm-hmm.
Like something wasn't right. Um, I went on a camping trip with a friend of mine out in the mountains, really remote. We were about probably it was about 10 miles off the highway, off the Alaska highway, so way remote. Um, and we camped out for 8 days out in the mountains and kind of toured around. And I thought that would reset me because I love camping. I love the bush. But all I did the whole time was worry about getting attacked by a bear. And right, like, so
Yeah.
took the fun away. So I came back to work. And then October 30th, 2018, I was the first on scene to a collision. And on a rural highway, and there was 3 vehicles involved. And as I got out of my patrol vehicle, this couple comes up to me and they got 2 kids with them. And the kids aren't hurt at all. They're just crying because they're scared.
Yeah.
And the instant I saw them, I couldn't talk. And my heart started racing. My thoughts were just jumbled. And I couldn't talk because I thought I was going to cry. And I said or did something to them and they seemed okay with it. I have no idea what. But I went and I checked on the other vehicles in the collision, and I didn't even realize there was a third vehicle there until I walked up to it, because I must have been experiencing tunnel vision.
Yeah.
And so I tried helping people in the collision. I couldn't. There was a girl that was just a couple years older than my daughter. I really wanted to help her. I couldn't because I just started crying. And so I just kind of made myself look busy. And the fire department got there fairly quickly, and there was a firefighter there that I knew, and is kind of friends with him, and we talked quite a bit. And I watched him as he was doing his job, and I just kind of pined because like that had been me. That had been me at one point, and now I felt that I was broken. And so that incident was the catalyst for me to actually go get help, because I realized I can't hide anymore. I have to do something about that.
Mm-hmm.
So I went to get it. I found a psychologist. She's amazing. She only sees first responders and veterans. And it took me 20 minutes to drive to her office for the first appointment. I spent the whole 20 minutes crying because I knew I was going to get help.
Yeah.
And I thought my appointment was for an hour, but I sat and cried in her office for 2. And during that session, she leans over and she puts her hand on my knee and she says, "You are not alone." And that's pretty
the fucking
powerful.
truth. That's
It
the
is.
truth right
It
there.
is the truth. It is the truth. And it was pretty powerful. It was pretty comforting, but I didn't actually believe it until 6 months later. I attended the courthouse, and I was going to for a trial or whatever. And there was a retired police officer at the courthouse, and he saw, like, I knew him. We talked once in a while. And as soon as he saw me, he left the conversation that he was in and he came over to see me. He said, "Hey man, I got to talk to you for a bit." So we go into this little side room, and he says, "What's going on?" And of course, I knew what he meant, but I wasn't about to spill the beans, right? Because I'm still experiencing stigma.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, "Well, I don't know." And he said, "Listen, I know something's going on. I have PTSD. I have PTSD."
He could see it. Yeah. He could see it. He knew.
And then he told me his story, and that was like a golden hug from heaven, because that's when you actually believe, when you get that peer-to-peer interaction.
Mm-hmm.
That's when I actually believed that I wasn't alone, and man, that was so powerful. But I want to bring up another point from my story. That firefighter that was at that collision where I believed I was broken and I couldn't function. Several months after that collision, he died from suicide.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
And
so he he was probably going through the same thing you were at that time, and you
Yeah.
never knew it.
Yeah. And it just affected us differently,
Yeah.
or something happened and it came on really fast for him. And
Wow.
so who knows, right? But um, so that's so important for me to speak up. And I embraced therapy. It was the best thing. I learned that my whole way of thinking was hurting me. Is pretty much right. Like
Yeah.
growing up with all the abuse and basically believing that I was not worth of anything, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
um, I didn't think I was worthy of anything, and to learning how to reframe my thoughts and think differently. And I used to have this catastrophic thinking style, like I just predicted, but it I realized later that style of thinking had served me as a child and as an adult, because everything always something bad always happened. So if I just predicted the this bad stuff, I would never be disappointed because something good didn't happen.
Yeah.
But at the same time, you're kind of manifesting negative stuff into your life by always predicting the future.
Yep.
So
You
that was
can't. You
actually,
can't worry. You can't worry about the future because the future's not here, and you
yeah,
can't worry about the past because the past is the past. The only thing,
100%.
the only thing that we can worry about is the here and now. You know,
Yeah,
can't
yeah,
worry about tomorrow because here's the thing.
yeah.
Well, yes,
No,
will we see tomorrow? More than likely, yes. But the thing
yeah.
is, it's not guaranteed. You know, and
But
that's the thing about life is that so many people, I believe, put too much worry in what they can't control right now. You know,
100%. And
can, control what you can control, and what you can control is what's right in front of you. You know.
yeah, I find that I have so much energy when I'm mindful, I'm in the present, because
Yeah.
when I stop worrying about stuff or thinking about the future or the past, it clears up all that space in your mind for something else. Like it's exhausting to be thinking about negative stuff all the time.
Yeah. But yet, I used to be that way. I mean, I
Yeah,
that's because that's how I lived my life. And my
yeah,
thing was, I don't know if it was like that for you, but my thing was, I had to bring everybody else into it. I had to drag people into my negativity, you know,
okay, yeah,
to I guess make myself feel better, you know, like kind of make myself look better in a way, you know,
yeah, yeah.
like
I
because
I was
what
surrounded.
misery loves company, right? That's
Yeah,
the old saying. Yeah.
I was surrounded by very negative people,
Uh,
and once I started therapy, I'm like, wait a minute, like I don't have use for most of these people anymore.
Yeah, the toxic,
Yeah,
toxic people. So what?
yeah.
How long from the time that you start therapy to actually working as a volunteer peer instructor? Like how long of a period was that?
Almost exactly 2 years.
Oh,
And
wow.
so, yeah, I know we had talked about it before we started recording. I uh, I became quite passionate about talking about mental health, because once I realized how many people had suffer from mental health issues, I um, I realized that I had almost died because of this stigma, which is ridiculous,
Yeah,
because so many
crazy.
people experience, right? It's so crazy. So I became an advocate. I started speaking out, and so many people reached out to me and said, "Hey, like, you're basically your story is the same as mine," or this is happening with me, or
Yeah.
I got diagnosed with something a year ago, and now I can finally tell somebody, right? That's what one friend told me.
Hmm.
I didn't work with him, but I'd known him for almost 20 years, and he said, yeah, like I got diagnosed last year and I can't talk about it, but now I can, right? Um,
It's because we as men and even some women, okay, because I believe the stigma just doesn't resonate with men, but it also resonates with women. You know,
yeah,
we're afraid to talk about things because a that's we're guys. We don't let our feelings show. You know,
Yeah.
I'm sorry, but I'm a crier. All right,
Yeah.
I'm an emotional guy now. You know, I'm not afraid to show my feelings, and but nor am I afraid today to 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 worry about the repercussions of me showing my feelings. You know,
Yep.
like because to me it's like I don't I don't care. I don't care if you don't like me crying or not. You know, if I feel something that's affecting me to where I can't control my emotions in that way, you know, especially when it comes to mental health, I don't I don't want to be a part of that stigma, you know, and
Yeah.
neither should anybody else. I think that people should speak up no matter what. You know, don't be afraid to speak up and say anything because if you don't, you know, you never know what could happen. You know,
Yeah.
and that's I don't know. I just feel like that especially with mental health in general, there needs to be more of a focus. Like here in the states, I truly believe that mental health gets pushed on the back burner. You know, um,
It does here too.
especially like with our guys and girls who are either police officers or first responders or military. You know, I truly believe the that gets all pushed back. I mean, yes, there's places like the VA and things of that nature, but so many people, especially doctors, are all about here, take this pill. You know, this will help
Yeah.
you. You know, take this, take that. You know, like no. I want you to actually sit down and listen to what I'm saying here. You know, and let me talk instead of trying to shove a little blue pill down my throat. You know,
Yeah. a
and
hundred
that's
percent.
it's. I think that it's just crazy how we need that more focus. You know, like
Yeah.
we need that. We need guys like you who are helping these people survive now. You know, because you are some of these. I bet money you probably have saved a couple lives and not known it. You know.
Yeah, maybe not knowing it. And I want to touch on that because everybody's scared to ask. People are scared to ask somebody how they're doing because they're scared of what the answer might be.
Yeah.
But you don't have to do anything, and you don't have to know anything, or you don't have to be like have all the wisdom.
Yeah.
All you need to do is hold space for someone,
Yep. And
right? And
listen. Yeah. You don't have to
yes,
have the answers. Yeah.
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 And when I look at my recovery, and from the time I saw my psychologist, the biggest jump in healing was that first visit, and all I did was release. I
Yeah.
sat there and cried and told her, right? And I felt safe and I felt like I could release it. That was the biggest jump because I could start sleeping after that. Well,
Yep.
you need to get sleep to get better, right? And then, there was lots of little incremental jumps after that where I learned all this other stuff, but just being able to release that emotion in a safe place and know that you're not judged. And going through this experience completely changed how I worked. And I I remember the first time it happened. So suffering all that stigma gave me a lot more empathy towards other people. And
Mm.
I started realizing, like, man, like all these people, everybody's suffering. We're all coming from this own place of our trauma, whatever it might
Yep.
be. And one night I was at work. It was later at night, and I stopped a guy for speeding out in the middle of nowhere. He was going really fast. I can't remember how fast, but it was pretty fast. And as I'm talking to him at the side of his vehicle there, and he's grabbing his documents for me, and I sensed that something wasn't right. And so
Mm-hmm.
I told him, I said, dude, stop. From pretend that I'm not in uniform right now. And from one man to another man, are you okay? And he just started crying.
Mm.
And he unloaded, and he was able to release, and he explained his situation to me, and it was a pretty tough situation that I couldn't relate to at all because I
Yeah.
didn't really understand, but I just held that space for him. And then I gave him resources. I'm like, hey, call these people, whatever. This is how you can get some help.
Mm-hmm.
And, I never heard from the guy again, never saw him again. Who knows what happened to him? But I'm sure that, having him know that somebody just understood or wanted to help him, that had to mean a lot, because I've been there. And when you know that someone's genuine and wants to help you, or cares about how you're doing, like, man, that's all you need. Or it's not, it's a huge piece, right?
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
especially like in today's society, it's still hustle and bustle.
Yeah.
It's nobody takes the time to actually sit and talk with somebody. Because we
Yeah.
never think that we have the time. You know,
Yeah.
that's why I do this podcast. This is my time for me to sit down, have a one-on-one conversation with my guests, or with my viewers, because that some of them might bring up questions in the chat, things of that nature. This is my time to heal myself, from all the distractions of life,
Yeah.
you know, because life gets pretty crazy and sometimes life gets in the way, you
Yeah.
know. But for what you're doing to help those who are out there fighting the battles every single day, that's I tell you that's a blessing. Yeah, you know.
Thanks. I appreciate it. It's very important to me. Um, I think you'd asked though how long it was. It was
Yeah.
until I got into peer support. It was 2 years. A
All right.
former coworker of mine had reached out because I was speaking up about mental health, and he said they needed facilitators for a peer support group, and so I promptly joined that and got in the training, and that was January 2021. So it's the middle of COVID.
Yeah.
Um, Here where I am, like there was a lot of closed stuff, was a lot of closed right then.
Yeah.
So all the facilitator training was done online through Zoom,
Hmm.
and there was 20 or 21 people in this facilitator class, and we all went around and told our stories, and there was no one there that had the same experience that I had, but they all understood my story, and I understood all of their stories,
Yeah.
even though all their injuries were so different.
Mm-hmm.
And it's that thing, the I guess the mechanism of injury is different, but the symptoms, the injury is still the same, right?
Yeah.
And that was that reinforced that whole belief of, um, we're all so similar to me. And then I started doing the peer support, and man, like when people get breakthroughs and they start to figure something out, like it's just amazing to watch. The light comes on in their faces again, and it's a pretty cool place to be, right? So
Yeah. Because you see somebody go from despair, to harmonious, and
yeah,
happy, and enjoying the life that they live in today.
yeah,
Like I for one, and I just now started watching you on like TikTok and things of that nature. I love it. Like how you were out walking the other day in the rain, and talk about being grounded, like that.
yeah,
That to me is like I I love when it rains. Number one, because it just clears up all the negativeness in this world, and
yeah,
after it rains, everything is much greener and brighter. You
yeah.
know, it so that it releases all that negative stuff and brings in brightness. You know, um, but yeah, you are an inspiration to people. I mean, and not only that, but I'm sure this is helping you tremendously. Because
I
you get to tell your story on
yeah.
a daily, weekly basis. You know, and
Well,
you're helping somebody else.
I've been told so many times how much my story helped somebody,
Uh,
right? And I got a message the other day. I ran into a guy I hadn't seen since the 90s. I grew up with him, and um, he had left, gone, did his thing. I did my thing, and
uh,
he was a few years older. But I ran into him at a store actually, and we started chatting, and I told him about a podcast that I'd done. So he looked it up, and he sent me a message later, and he's like, man, he's like, I listened to that, and you're giving people hope by telling your story. And man, that's so powerful. And I got emotional just listening to his message, because all I ever wanted when I was struggling was some hope.
Yeah.
And you know, I personally worked with 4 guys that died from suicide, and I knew another guy that had died from suicide as well. So I, in my lifetime, I've known 5 people that died from suicide,
Yeah.
and all of these guys were high performers and high rising stars until they weren't.
Yeah.
Right. And like, their careers were on fast track. The one guy owned a big business for a while, and then he actually lost it to addictions. But
Mm.
um, you know, we have to be more cognizant of what we're all going through, because we hide it very well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, some people like us, some men like us have beards. Some of us hide it. They hide it behind
Yeah.
their facial hair, or they hide it behind their
Yeah.
tattoos and their piercings,
Yeah.
or they hide it behind their religion.
Yes. Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
Because I'm a very spiritual person. I'm not a religious person, but I believe that there are unhappy people everywhere.
Yeah.
You know, we some people just choose to mask their pain and their sorrows differently than others. You know,
Yeah.
um, I don't I don't grow this beard to hide my problems anymore. You know,
Yeah.
I grow this beard because I have a passion. I raise money for charity through it. You know, um, but my passion now is to help other people understand that they're not alone. You know,
Yeah.
and that they matter. You know, and
100%.
no matter what you go through in this life, life might suck sometimes. Yes. Does it suck that my wife had to have shoulder surgery, and is dealing with that? Yeah, but in the end, it's gonna make her better. It's gonna make her stronger. You know,
Yeah.
with death comes life. You know,
Yeah.
so with death of letting your old self go and surrendering to your new self, you're creating a better life, and you're creating a better space for not only yourself but for others.
Yeah.
And that's what you're doing. In your career, is you are creating a better space for people to heal.
Yeah. And you're
You
doing
know,
it too by hosting this, right? Like, you
I
have to
tell you,
be.
it's taken. It's very therapeutic for me to do what I do. Um, there are weeks when I get caught up in the numbers, and I'm like, oh yes, how many people watched, you know, but then again, I'm like, you know what? I shouldn't worry about that. The only thing I should worry about is maybe me doing this is helping somebody out there who's struggling right now. You know, um,
Yeah.
it helps me. It helps every single episode. Even when I get done with the episode, because there have been some episodes where I'm like, why'd I even do that episode? You know, but I try to find something from that episode that has helped me as a person. You know, um,
Yeah.
I've had guests on here that have opened my eyes and helped me see that I need to do a little bit more growing.
Yeah.
Because my thing is we don't stop growing as human beings. Yes, bodies. Yes, our height and stuff like that might stop. But when it comes to our mentalness and our awareness, that never stops. We're always growing, and we're always striving to do better. You know, so I think what you're doing today in that line of work, helping those who are on the forefront, who are having to deal with the stigma, you know, because it's got to be hard. Being a law enforcement, being a firefighter, being an EMT. You're out there. Those men and women are out there daily. You know, having to deal with people who were just like you and just like me, dealing with that mental stuff. You know,
Yep.
but then again, they have people that they can turn to and they can talk to. You know.
Well, hopefully, there's so many. I guess I don't know. The culture in those environments though is very masculine or toxic masculine, right?
Yeah, it is.
And people are scared and they don't always know who to talk to sometimes, and they don't want to talk to anybody from their organization because then
Yeah, they're afraid it's going to
there's
get back to somebody. Yeah.
yeah, and it's such a dog eat dog world sometimes, right? Like they're out helping everybody else but they can't help each other, so
No.
and it's unfortunate. But I just had a discussion with an EMS peer supporter today, and we had this discussion of how do you make it better, right? Because it's pretty hard.
Yeah.
But I think every time somebody tells a story, it chips a little way a bit away at the stigma, right? So
Mm-hmm.
that's why we have to stand up and talk. And you were talking about your beard and your tattoos, and the one thing I've noticed is when a guy with a beard and tattoos starts talking about mental health and gets vulnerable, that catches people attention
Yeah.
because everybody's like, they're kind of stereotypical, they've stereotyped you,
Yeah.
right? And, I got the shaved head to go with it too, right? And, two kind of sleeves going, and then all of a sudden I start talking about vulnerable stuff. And that's when people start really paying attention. They're like, what is happening right now?
Yeah. So, you mean to tell me this dude's not a skinhead?
Yeah, he's not a biker or something.
He's not a
right?
biker?
Yeah. So it's I guess I use it to my advantage. It's funny though because I got a fairly bushy beard too, but I used to never want to have a beard because of my childhood, because in the cult, the men always had to have a beard.
Yeah, I was actually going to ask you that. So that's cool. That's cool that you touched on that, because I was wondering if that had, hey, because you were forced to grow one, so to speak.
Yeah.
Like I didn't know if you freaking picked up the razor. It's like
no. So it took me a long time to grow facial hair, but I started getting pressured when I was about 14 or 15 to shave or to not shave.
Yeah.
And I was shaving because there's like one hair here and one hair here, right? Like it wasn't a beard by any means, but they just wanted to grow it out, right? And I was in my mid 30s before I even contemplating having a beard because I didn't want anybody to mistake me for somebody from them.
Yeah, that's crazy, and that's the beautiful thing, about not only the mental health community, but like I said, I'm part of the bearding community. The beautiful thing about that is that we accept you no matter what. Hey, what's up?
Yeah.
Is that your boy?
He said, "What's up?" Yeah, that's my son.
The sink in your room is leaking.
Okay, turn the tap off.
I did.
Okay.
I appreciate you coming on. I'm gonna let you go because you need to spend some time with the family. The families are important. Little boys need their dads.
Yeah. He's impatient. I promised him a movie night after I was done.
Dude,
this. So.
You gotta go do it, man. You gotta go do the
I know.
movies.
Yeah.
So I appreciate you coming on, and talking with me and talking with my guest. Before I finish the night, before I wrap it up, I always like to ask my guests just to say something positive to those out there who might need to hear it. Yeah, we've said a lot of stuff tonight that people need to hear, but if there's like something you could say to somebody who's out there hurting right now, or who needs words of encouragement, what would that be?
Well, normally I would say you're not alone and reach out to someone, but we kind of touched on that.
Yeah.
So I want to say this, and I'm going to stress that though, if you are struggling, reach out, and if the first person doesn't help you, reach out again and keep reaching out, because somebody will understand and somebody will help you. And likewise, if you're not suffering, but you think you might know somebody that is, just reach out and talk to them, because they just need you to hold space for them.
Yeah.
You don't have to know the right things to say. But something that I kind of only realized recently in my life as well is that every person on this planet is divine and therefore is worthy of divinity.
Mm-hmm.
So no matter what you are thinking about yourself or how other people have taught or made you think about yourself, you are worthy of divinity. I used to be unhappy in my marriage, and I would consciously think, well, I'm never going to get anything better. I'm never going to have it better than I am. And it only gets better when you work on yourself. So just, you are worthy of divinity.
Yeah. That's amazing. That's a good way to wrap it up. Well, sir, thank you for coming on. And enjoy the rest of your Friday night, all right, with your family there. And man, maybe one day I'll have you back on. There's a couple of guests that I'm gonna have back on just because I feel like they've left an impression, and I would love to have you back on and probably have some more people from the organization that you work with on. I think that'd be pretty awesome to have that little roundtable discussion, so to speak.
For
But
sure.
thank you, Laverne, for taking your time out. And man, just keep on blessing others with what you do on a daily basis. I appreciate you.
Thank you for having me, and I will never stop.
No, don't stop. You know, there's people out there hurting, so don't stop. All right, I'm gonna kick you in the back. And I'm gonna wrap up the show. I'll be with you in a minute.
All right.
All right. Thanks to all of you who have watched tonight. Thanks to all of you who will watch coming up. If you could all do me a favor, though, I just have one little tiny favor. Right? Those of you know that I am part of the Talking Beards Network. Aaron Johnston and Sean Glanders have graciously let me use their platform to broadcast my podcast. Well, we use a little thing called StreamYard. Right? StreamYard helps us broadcast our platforms. Well, StreamYard's becoming a little iffy when it comes to being able to broadcast to certain pages, things of that nature. So if you would, go over to YouTube, which Mr. Christopher Hall, who has been here tonight in the chat, go over to the Talking Beards YouTube page and subscribe to it, because here soon, that's going to be the new home of Shape the Podcast. That's going to be the new home of Talking Beards, which is the host on Tuesday nights at 8 p.m. Aaron Johnson and Sean Glanders. Yeah, go over there, like and subscribe to their page. I am going to be making a Shape the Podcast YouTube page simply because I'm trying to get more people involved. If you want to come on the show and you want to be a guest and you want to talk about what's going on in your life, by all means, reach out to me. I would love to have you on. In 2 weeks, I'll have an awesome guy by the name of Greg Blankenship. I met Greg in a tattoo community group that I'm in. And one day I was in there talking about the podcast. Next thing you know, I have like 5 or 6 tattoo artists, saying, hey, what you're doing is amazing. I want to come on and I want to share my story. So Greg is one of those guys. He'll be coming on in 2 weeks, and he'll be talking about his journey with mental health. Other than that, have a great night, everybody. Again, reach out to somebody, say hello, because you never know what anybody's going through, and shape the world around you. See you in 2 weeks.